The air inside the Mercedes-Benz Superdome wasn't just hot, it was vibrating. As the lead cameraman for the sideline crew, I had filmed 3 Super Bowls, but 2013 felt like standing inside a microwave. My headset was buzzing with a frequency I hadn't heard before, a low-pitched, rhythmic hum that seemed to bypass my ears and throb directly in my skull. I checked my monitors, the color grading was shifting. The vibrant purple and gold of the Ravens and 49ers were bleeding into a pale, sickly ultraviolet. I signaled my technician, but he was staring blankly at the field, his hand frozen on the zoom toggle. The crowd's roar, usually a chaotic wall of sound, had synchronized into a singular, haunting drone. It wasn't a cheer anymore. It was a collective, subconscious response to a stimulus we couldn't yet see. My skin began to prickle as if 1,000 needles were touching me at once.
The planet Earth Sector 4G has reached its peak neural resonance. Our sensors have been monitoring this specific temporal spatial node for decades. The Super Bowl is not a game. It is the moment of maximum synchronized human focus. 70,000 biological units in a confined dome, and billions more connected via the electromagnetic grid. It is the perfect harvest. As Unit X712, my directive was to stabilize the static field. We hovered 30,000 feet above the New Orleans coordinates, cloaked in a phase shift veil. The energy emanating from the stadium was a blinding gold in the spectrum of our optics. It was time to initiate the siphon. The atmospheric pressure was adjusted, the local power grid was suppressed, and the blackout protocol was engaged. The biologicals would perceive it as a technical failure. We perceived it as a laboratory.
Then the world died. It wasn't like a fuse blowing or a transformer exploding. The lights didn't flicker, they were simply erased. One moment the stadium was a cathedral of light, and the next it was a tomb. But it wasn't a natural darkness. In New Orleans, even in a blackout, there's ambient light, glow-in-the-dark jerseys, cell phone screens, exit signs. This was different. The darkness felt thick, like obsidian liquid filling the lungs of 70,000 people. I reached for my backup flashlight, but my fingers felt like lead. Through the silence, I heard a sound that didn't belong in a stadium. The sound of a massive, metallic lung exhaling, a pressurized hiss that echoed from the very top of the dome. I looked up, expecting to see the steel rafters. Instead, I saw a rift. A tear in the darkness where the stars.
The transition was seamless. By vibrating the local molecules at a frequency that negates the flow of linear time, we achieved a total chronolock. To the humans, time had stopped. To us, the stadium became a high-resolution gallery of biological data. I descended through the dome's crown, my physical form partially phased to avoid structural collision. Below, the heat signatures of 70,000 fans were pulsating in a rhythmic pattern. This was the harvest of emotion. We were not here for their gold or their minerals. We were here for the unique electrochemical spikes produced by their tribal competition. I watched as my drones began the neural mapping. Each human's memory of the last 3 hours was being extracted, compressed, and uploaded to the hive core. Their adrenaline, their fear, their ecstasy, all of it was being distilled.
34 minutes, that's what the official record says, but for me, time had lost its meaning. I turned my camera, which was somehow still drawing power from an unknown source, toward the bench. Ray Lewis was mid-breath, his chest expanded, but his eyes were wide and glacier than any human eye should be. Beside him, a cheerleader was suspended an inch off the ground, caught in the middle of a jump, defying gravity as if the Earth's core had stopped pulling. They weren't just still, they were paused. I walked onto the turf, my footsteps making no sound on the artificial grass. As I reached the 50-yard line, I noticed the shadows. They weren't the shadows of the players. They were independent, dark shapes gliding across the field, translucent and jagged. They were walking among the frozen humans.
While the drones proceeded with the extraction, my optics caught a deviation in the fourth quadrant sideline area. A single biological unit, designated as a media operator, was moving. This was impossible. The chronolock should have neutralized all synaptic activity. Yet this human, Elias, was walking across the turf. His neural pathways were firing in a pattern we had never seen before. His fear was so intense it had bypassed the temporal dampeners. He was staring at the harvesters, his primitive eyes somehow perceiving our phase-shifted forms. This was a critical breach. If a single observer remained conscious during the siphon, the data would be corrupted by observer interference. I signaled the hive mind for a memory wipe, but then I stopped. His camera, it was recording. Not on his digital tape, but on a frequency that was leaking into our own network.
As I ventured further onto the field, the silence became deafening. It wasn't the absence of sound, but the presence of a vacuum. I could hear my own heart, not as a beat, but as a heavy, metallic thud echoing off the frozen bodies around me. The harvesters, those jagged, smoke-like entities, were hovering inches above the turf. One of them drifted toward a group of fans in the front row. It didn't touch them, it inhaled from them. I watched in horror as a faint, golden mist rose from the chests of the spectators, drawn into the void where the entity's face should have been. It was their vitality, their passion, their memories of the game being siphoned out. I tried to scream, but the air was too thin, too cold. My voice died in my throat, sounding like dry leaves skittering on pavement. I realized then that the blackout wasn't a
Neural extraction is proceeding at 89.4% efficiency. The collective emotional output of the Ravens faction is providing a high-yield surge of dopamine-laced energy. This specific human conflict, this game, is a remarkably efficient generator of raw psychic fuel. We have successfully filtered the hope and despair components, storing them in the hive core for long-term starry ignition. The biological units remain in stage 3 stasis, their consciousnesses looped in a 0.5-second feedback cycle. To them, the blackout is an instant. To us, it is a harvest season. However, the energy spikes from the Bayon's performance are causing minor fluctuations in the containment field. The residual acoustic vibrations are still resonating within the dome's structure, creating pockets of reality.
I reached the 49ers sideline. Colin Kaepernick stood there mid-gesture, pointing toward the defense. I walked up to him, my hand trembling. When I touched his jersey, I didn't feel fabric. It felt like cold, polished glass. Through the translucent surface of his skin, I could see his veins, but they weren't pumping red blood. They were pulsing with a fluorescent blue light, the same light I saw in the rift above the stadium. He wasn't a man anymore. He was a biological hard drive being rewritten. I looked at my own hands. To my terror, my fingertips were starting to turn transparent. The static field was finally claiming me. I looked at my camera's viewfinder again. The screen was no longer showing the stadium. It was showing.
Subject Elias has reached the center of the extraction zone. His presence is no longer a mere glitch. He is becoming a focal point of the anomaly. Our scanners indicate that his camera, a primitive optical recording device, has inadvertently synced with our phase shift frequency. He is capturing the invisible harvest. This is a violation of the non-interference mandate. I attempted to initiate a localized temporal erasure on his position, but the hive mind intervened. The hive sees Elias not as a threat, but as a potential bridge. If a human can perceive us during the siphon and survive, his neural architecture could be used as a template for the next generation of shepherds. I have been ordered to monitor his interaction with the primary collector.
The rift in the dome's ceiling began to rotate. A massive crystalline structure descended, shaped like an inverted pyramid, humming with a frequency that made my teeth ache. This was the source. The harvesters bowed their amorphous heads as the pyramid emitted a beam of pure, silent white light that hit the 50-yard line. The turf exploded upward, but there was no dirt, only data, strings of glowing symbols that looked like a fusion of Sanskrit and binary code. I fell to my knees, the weight of the cosmic presence crushing my lungs. I felt a hand, or something like a hand, on my shoulder. I turned, expecting a monster, but I saw a reflection of myself, only older, with eyes that held the depth of 1,000 galaxies. It whispered in a language I felt.
The descent of the primary collector has triggered a resonance crisis. The stadium's structural integrity is vibrating at a frequency that threatens to shatter the illusion of the blackout. In the outside world, the human authorities are attempting to bypass the grid failure, unaware that the grid doesn't exist anymore. If they succeed in forcing a power surge before the harvest is complete, the resulting explosion of raw data would wipe out the entire Mississippi Delta. I see Elias looking at the apex. His primitive mind is breaking, yet he continues to hold his camera. He is attempting to save this moment. I find myself experiencing a sensation I cannot categorize, a flickering of my own neural circuits. Is it curiosity? I have watched.
The inverted pyramid above the 50-yard line began to hum a melody that wasn't sound, but pure memory. Suddenly, I wasn't just in the Superdome, I was everywhere. I saw the childhood of the quarterback, the first time the wide receiver felt the sting of a cold winter, the secret fears of the woman in seat 402. Their lives were being unspooled like magnetic tape. The harvesters were weaving these threads of memory into a shimmering tapestry of light. I realized the Super Bowl wasn't the goal, it was the bait. The intense, collective focus of millions of minds had created a thin spot in the fabric of our dimension. We were being milked for our essence, our very history. My camera was shaking in my hands, its lens now glowing with a blinding, ethereal white. I wasn't just recording a game anymore. I was witnessing the cosmic plagiarism of the human.
The harvest is reaching critical mass. 96.2% of the targeted neural data has been synthesized into the hive core. However, the structural integrity of the dome is failing. The human's primitive engineering cannot withstand the gravitational shear of a Class 5 siphon. My sensors are detecting a massive backflow from subject Elias. His camera, by some miracle of quantum entanglement, has become a two-way portal. He isn't just being recorded, he is recording us back into the human collective subconscious. If he survives, every human in that stadium will wake up with a ghost memory of our presence. This would compromise the next century of harvests. I should terminate the subject immediately. My logic circuits dictate a localized soul burn, but my experimental.
As the extraction intensified, the stadium itself began to protest. The massive steel beams of the Superdome started to groan, a sound like a dying whale. The physics of our world were being bent to accommodate the massive energy transfer. I saw the air ripple like water, and for a moment the stadium walls vanished, revealing the cold, indifferent vacuum of space beyond. We were no longer in New Orleans. We were in a pocket dimension, a laboratory suspended between breaths. The frozen players started to vibrate, their bodies blurring as if they were being broadcast at the wrong frequency. I saw Ray Lewis's helmet begin to melt, not from heat, but from the sheer weight of the data being pulled through his mind. Stop it.
External interference is rising. The human engineers outside the blackout zone have initiated a massive, desperate power surge through the city's substations. They are trying to shock the stadium back into the grid. This surge is creating a chaotic electrical storm within our static field. To the humans inside, it looks like lightning dancing on the grass. To us, it is a digital poison. The primary collector is struggling to maintain the phase shift. If the surge hits the apex before the siphon is complete, the resulting feedback loop will vaporize everyone within a 5-mile radius. I must decide, do I abort the mission and lose the harvest, or do I risk a reality collapse to finish the upload? I look at Elias.
A countdown appeared in my mind, not numbers I could read, but a feeling of sand slipping through fingers. We were at the 30-minute mark of the blackout. The primary collector above me began to pulse with a deep, rhythmic violet light. I felt a sudden, violent tug on my consciousness. My own memories, my son's first steps, my wife's laughter, the smell of the Louisiana rain started to migrate toward my fingertips. I was being uploaded. I looked at the camera's monitor one last time. It showed the broadcast feed that the world should have been seeing, a technical difficulties slide. But beneath the slide, hidden in the static, was a message intended for our captors. It was a signature. A code. We weren't the only ones being watched. I realized then that the harvest.
The hive mind has issued a redaction command. We cannot risk a public exposure of this magnitude. I have been ordered to initiate the emergency shroud, a massive global memory dampener that will rewrite the last 34 minutes for every observer on the planet. But there is a catch. The shroud requires a carrier wave, a human mind that has witnessed the truth to act as the anchor for the lie. Elias is the only candidate. To save the stadium from vaporization, I must trap Elias' consciousness in the gap between the blackout and the reality. He will become the ghost in the machine, the one who remembers everything so that no one else has to. I begin the synchronization process. I am sorry, biological unit. You were too observant.
The countdown in my head hit 0. There was no explosion, only a sudden, violent pull, like being sucked through a straw. My vision shattered into a million digital shards. In an instant, the cold vacuum of the rift was replaced by the humid, sweaty air of the Superdome. The lights didn't just turn on, they screamed back to life, buzzing with a fierce intensity that blinded me for several seconds. When my sight cleared, the world was moving again. Jacoby Jones was running down the field, the crowd was roaring, and my headset was filled with the frantic voice of the director. Imre, stay on the play. What are you doing at the 50-yard line? I was standing in the middle of the field, my camera still on my shoulder, but the grass beneath my feet was scorched in a pattern no one else seemed to notice. I looked at the scoreboard. Only 34 minutes had passed, but my soul felt centuries older. I checked my recording. The digital file was corrupted except for the last 3 seconds. It didn't show the game. It showed a pair of empty, star-filled eyes looking directly into the lens. I didn't lose my job that night, but I lost my peace. Every time I close my eyes, I don't see the stadium. I see the
The emergency shroud has been successfully deployed. The biological units have been resynced to their local temporal stream. To the billions of observers, the blackout was a mere malfunction of an aging stadium's electrical grid, a narrative we have reinforced through their digital news cycles and social networks. The harvest was 98.2% successful. The energy gathered will sustain our sector for 3 cycles. However, as we retracted the primary collector into the phase shift, I monitored subject Elias, the anchor held. He absorbed the truth so the rest could live the lie, but a trace remains. Our extraction left a microscopic fracture in his neural cortex, a ghost file that we cannot delete without destroying the host. He will spend his remaining days seeing the seams in the fabric of their reality. As my craft descends toward the Uit cloud, I look back at the blue marble. They think they are playing a game of yards and touchdowns. They do not realize they are simply the livestock of a cosmic arena.